Stop here. This is the place.
One of the things that I love is that two films idea of your life. And there's two stories you can tell. One that is safe and full of regret, and one that is risky and full of pride and joy. This place seems to be a stepping stone across that bridge that is so scary to walk across.
All right. Is this on? This is on. Okay. First of all, I would marry Mickey if I wasn't married. And then I would hold on for dear life. That was awesome. Let alone everybody else. It's been a tremendous few days. I'm pretty short, and I got slides. I've never, ever done a talk about myself. I've talked about environment and science and stuff like that. So I'm slide heavy. So if you can't see this, you're going to miss out on everything. So there's some seats up here if you want. Anyways, this is me. This is how most people know me. I'm most well known as a hockey player. And especially if you're from Boston, this is, yeah, or New England or anywhere. This is how you know me. A Stanley Cup winner with the Boston Bruins. This moment came after 2 months of playoffs, which was about 26 games of playoffs, after 82 games of the regular season, after 12 games of preseason. So I think it was like 110, 120 games, something like that. Separated shoulder. I think there's bruised ribs. There's stitches and a really horrible beard. But this moment is like pure emotions just like going, because what happens in playoffs and sports with good athletes and good playoff performers is you literally turn into a sociopath. And I don't use that term lightly. You literally remove all emotion from your life. You block out any outside influence. You're a horrible family member. You're a horrible friend. You don't return any calls. You don't share anything. And the reason for that is that you're playing every day. You're just playing and playing and playing and playing and playing. And sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, sometimes you play like shit, sometimes you have a great game. But the secret to success is being able to move on and just kind of forget about yesterday and move on to the next day. So you literally forget emotion and remove yourself. So my emotion finally happened about half an hour before this picture was taken. There was like 3 minutes left in the hockey game, and we scored, a goal which put the game out of reach. And there's 3 minutes left on the clock, and I was literally just like, "Oh my God, we're actually gonna fucking win!" Like, this is unbelievable. And every moment of like childhood dreams of like failure of everything just started kind of rushing out. And for the next like few months, I felt like that. But in that moment particularly, the strongest emotion was actually relief. It wasn't even happiness. And I thought that was kind of weird. Looking back now, people are like, "Oh, you must have been so happy." I'm like, I was just kind of relieved. And the reason for that kind of goes back to this. This is a few years earlier when I played for the Calgary Flames, a team in Calgary. Hockey is the biggest thing you can imagine in Canada. It is a religion. And we went to the finals with Calgary. So it was Stanley Cup finals. A Canadian team hadn't won in forever. And this is game 6 of the Stanley Cup finals. We had the lead in the series. All we had to do was win one game, and we could win the Stanley Cup at home in Canada. I would never have to buy another beer ever, ever for the rest of my life. And this is Marty Jelena, a teammate of mine. There's a play at the net. I was on the ice. I was about 20 feet behind him, looking at this play. And I don't know if you can see, this is the puck. And all this puck has to do is cross this line. There's a red line there. So there's a bit of a debate as to whether it actually crossed or not, but this guy's goalie pad came this way. So as you can imagine, the puck and the goalie pad, I don't know if the puck crossed the line, but that's how close we came. This is like, this would have won us the Stanley Cup, this play right here. It was counted as no goal. Tampa Bay, who we were playing, went on to win that game, and then they went on to win Game 7. And so we went to Tampa Bay and lost Game 7, lost all those dreams of like, I'm a hero in Canada and never paying for beer. And I was crying like crazy, like in the locker room, like that same emotion of me, like relief, was just as strong of like devastation. And no matter what, I feel pretty good, like I can move on from stuff. That was one thing I could never move on from. I had so many what ifs. What if that would have crossed? What if they would have counted it a goal? What if? And I couldn't shake it until that moment where I actually lifted the cup. And so that's kind of the way I've treated the rest of my life of I don't want any what ifs. What ifs suck. They're horrible. And that's my story about hockey. But anyways, I'll go back to, like, who am I? So yes, sports are very important. I had the most typical Canadian upbringing. My dad was out there with the garden hose, like flooding the ice, and I was skating around like 2 years old. So typical. Sports were always very huge. I was skiing and snowboarding at a young age with my sister. I did tons of sports in school. I had a wicked haircut. I was really good at track, volleyball, basketball, rugby, lacrosse, like every sport you could think of, I played. I started working on my quads at a young age. I'm the one on the right. And I kind of continued that into like my adulthood, where I just played every sport. Like, so sports are huge. I tried everything: triathlons, tennis, surfing. I love cycling. Obviously, Duke found that out this morning. A bit of a warm-up ride, but that was all right. But there's more than just sports. Sports are, like I said, they take up a big chunk of memories and part of my life, but this is kind of the rest of me. I'm also a partner in venture capital that supports really early seed startups focused on sustainability. This is my favorite one. We're helping to build these guys up right now. They turn anything that's biodegradable, so any organic waste, we can turn into biodegradable plastic. And so we put this waste into a tank and it ferments, and then we starve the bacteria. The bacteria has this feast. The bacteria gets 90% body fat. We kill the bacteria, sorry. We harvest the fat, and the fat is biodegradable plastic. So that's the kind of stuff I'm involved in a lot and have a lot of passion about. So venture capitalism, building up companies that can change the world. I'm also an activist for a lot of things. I care about each and every single one. Homelessness. This is actually the Pride Parade in Edmonton. I was the first ever captain of a sports team, which is crazy that it's this far along, to walk in a Pride Parade, support those issues. That goes back a ways to a friend of mine I played with. People ask, why are you walking in a Pride Parade? I had a friend that I played hockey with back when we were teenagers. We skateboarded, we snowboarded together. Really good friends. And he fell off the deep end one day. He ran away from home, started doing tons of drugs, lived on the street. He was disappeared basically to Vancouver for 10 years, living on the streets. I didn't see him for at least 15 years. And then finally saw him, and he was great. He sharpened up, was great, living a good life. And the thing that turned him was he finally came out of the closet. And he shared his stories of quitting hockey when we had to start showering. Because he was so scared of none of his friends would like him, and he was gay, and how could he ever play sports and do that? And so things like that have really affected me. So it's not just I feel obligated, I should go walk in the Pride Parade. No, everything I do has a really personal touch to it and means a lot to me. So activism has played a huge part of my life. Fitness and community building. This is my daughter Ava. This is the November Project in Edmonton. It's a free fitness group. Monday, Wednesday, Friday, all year long for the last 3 years. We'll have upwards of 400 people just show up. There's no membership. There's nothing. We just kind of post, hey, meet here. And then people come and they work out and they sweat and stuff, but they also meet new people and they become a community. And so we do this November Project. This is a video of us at our football stadium in Edmonton. So we do this every single Wednesday. It's nuts. It blows me away every time that we do it, and it changes people's lives. We've had people that have shared with us, you saved me from wanting to kill myself. You helped me shed 200 pounds. You are the only friends I have. Stuff like that, which is just so life-changing. I'm also, last 2 years, like I said, in environmentalism, I call it common sensism. I don't know, I grew up in a house where we just composted. That was part of our deal. We grew stuff. My parents were not hippies by any mean. any means, but they grew up on farms, and you don't waste stuff. So to me, that's what environmentalism is. It's just common sense. You don't waste shit, and if you can do something more efficiently, you just do it that way. So I'd always done a lot of environmental initiatives and stuff that I just jump into, but I kind of saw the horizon of my hockey career coming. So for the last 2 years, I took classes through Harvard and did stuff through corporate sustainability and innovation. I'm actually just as proud as this as the Stanley Cup. That was like a really huge day for me. Because I really I love the science, I love the technology, and I hate waste, hate it. And finally, I'm also a parent and a husband. So my wife, Krista, on the far end, the other two are a little young to be wives. This is Krista over here. She's so rad. She's a professional snowboarder, did a bunch of X Games, stuff like that, and she's incredible. My life is so selfish, a professional athlete, lives a really crazy life. They get to come to do lectures by themselves, stuff like that. So she's been an amazing parent, amazing partner and support. And then my daughter, Ava, is beside Krista. She's 11, and Stella is beside, or sitting on my lap, and she's 7. That's in India last year. We served lunch to 20,000 people that come through this temple every day, which was nuts. So super busy life. And I'm very structured. I set goals, and I categorize things, and I'm all over the map, but I do structure things. And so for my life, I have to prioritize, what's the most important thing? I have a super busy life. I have a ton going on all over the place. What's the most important to me? So I'll start from the bottom. That's me, getting hit in the glass. Wow. That happens lots when you're my height. I'm very short for a hockey player. So sports holds the lowest spot on my list of importance, whatever you want to call it. Has a huge cultural impact. I had so many dads and sons and daughters and moms and families come up and say, we bond over your games. This is memories. This is all. And there's 1 million people out for our parade in Boston when we won. And so I understand the cultural importance of sports. But it's sports. In all seriousness, it doesn't have a huge effect on life. I put activism and some of that stuff as kind of the next pillar. For me, activism, it's doing what's right. It's doing the right thing. It's helping people that need help, or supporting people that need support, giving voice to people that don't have it. When you play hockey, especially in Canada, you have a massive soapbox. And it's such a shame if you don't use it for something positive. So activism is that next level for me. The environmental work, whether it's stuff with the league, stuff with hockey, with sports, or whether it is the venture capital stuff, that is crazy important to me. And I think we're in a group that gets it. It's something needs to be done. There has to be leaders. There's enough doom and gloom. I try not to focus on that, but there's so many great leaders and so many great ideas out there, and they need that same support. So that's my next phase of life, is supporting and building that to quite literally change the world. And as cliche as it may sound, there quite literally is nothing more important than my kids. And the reason I say that is, the other stuff, you think, the environment stuff, but kids, for me, the way I see it, and the importance of focusing on them and nurturing them, is that I believe as a parent and as a generation, literally our task is to make them better than us. They should be smarter, more evolved. My only job as a parent is to literally give them that foundation and build up their foundation so that when they're old enough, they can start creating their own ideas and be way better than I am. And so I think that is quite literally my most important job, and I treat it that way. I want them to be cool. I want them to be better than me. I want them to change the world more than I changed it. So that's what I'm going to talk about. Everybody else stole all the inspirational quotes and stuff like that. I'm last. But nobody talked about their kids, so yes, good for me. So I'm going to tell you a few things. Yes, I teach them, say thank you, look people in the eye, stuff like that. But I chose 5 things that I teach my kids to give them that foundation. First one being, beat to your own drum. So I grew up a punk, like all the punk shows, the chain. You know, I went to my first like hockey training camp with shaved head, Doc Martens up to here, and chain hanging down here, and walking in all punk rock and like anti-establishment. And it's kind of funny looking back on it and all that, but I think it really gave me my foundation of how I kind of look at the world. And I grew up with parents that were incredible. Like, there's quite literally no trauma in my childhood at all. My mom was a doctor, my dad was a dentist. They're very open-minded, so supportive. But the foundation that they gave me was, they said, always respect your elders. Respect them, respect your teachers, respect the police, respect us, but never stop questioning. If your teacher's telling you something in school and you have a different opinion or you don't quite agree with them, question them. Do it with respect, but question them. And never blindly follow people. So that whether it's your elders telling you to do something or your friends, don't just follow them. Always question and do things your own way. Beat to your own drum. And so I think into adulthood, that's stayed with me. I think it's about not just kind of doing what the cool kids are doing or doing what you're kind of thought you're supposed to do or thought you're supposed to be. This is recently this year. We launched something called Pride Tape, which, we're like, hey, we want to support our friends. We want to support youth in sports, in the LGBTQ community. How do we do that? And so a symbol of support, to be a strong ally. We did something like Pride Tape. It was so simple, like wrapping your hockey tape or your hockey stick with the colors of the rainbow. The rest of the hockey world is kind of like, what the fuck is this? But it's doing things like that and stepping out. And once you kind of explain it and beat to your own drum and you're like, explain your drum beat to people, and then they start to get it. And so this was a smashing success. And you can take so much pride in stuff when you are kind of the first one there and when you're the first one to do it. You can also create fantastic memories. This is later on in the summer. Everybody that wins the Stanley Cup gets a 1 day with it. You get one single day. So you literally work your entire life to... you're working every day, you're working out, and trust me, you dream about this day like your whole career. And so the typical day for a player that wins, and it's sad. It's just like every hockey player golfs. It's so sad. I hate golf. not every hockey player, but most of them have like a typical cup day. What they do is they go to where they grew up. The mayor of small town wherever has them come to the office. And then they stay there for a couple hours, and then they, go to the community hockey rink, and then they sit at a table and sign autographs for 4 hours, and then they get a quick little dinner with their family, and then the cup's gone. And I was like, oh my God, that's like hell. That's hell. So I was like, beating to your own drum can create great memories. So I'm like, man, I'm going to Boston, and I'm going to make the most of this day. So I'm a huge cyclist. Like I said, I love urban biking and transportation. So I'm biking that. Most people got like a limo or something like that. I'm biking that thing in the kid's carriage. So this is my daughter's stroller. She would usually be in that going to school across Boston. But we took the cup around Boston. We did a lot of work with a rehabilitation hospital. So we went there and I don't know if anybody knows the Hoyts, Rick and Dick. They run triathlons. He has cerebral palsy, and the dad pulls the boat. And it's insane. So they're good friends. So we visited with them at the rehab hospital and a bunch of people there, and it was insanely awesome. I went to the kids' school and had a big party at the school. And then we went to my neighborhood, which is the north end of Boston, the Italian area. And every summer it's insane there. They have these saints festivals. So the Italians have a lot of saints too. I think who said that? In Mexico there's saint every single day. So the Italians have a lot of saints too. And they have these parades through the streets. And so I was talking with our buddies in the north end, and I'm like, am I doing something wrong if we have a Saint Stanley thing? And they're like, no, that'd be amazing. and so that's this is the north end. That's the Stanley Cup. And we literally have it on people are holding it and touching it and grabbing it, but it's on this pillar, and we're cruising through the streets of Boston, and we ended up with there's a flash mob and all kinds of crazy stuff going on. But my memories of that day are incredible. I literally wouldn't change a thing, because we did it my way. It's like Sinatra said. So the kids are catching on already. I tell them to smile, and they're like, yeah, I'm gonna beat to my own drum. The next one that I love, and this is a bit about my dad, it's never give up. And that's, usually you just hear that first part, but even when you're winning, even when you're on top of your game, don't give up. Don't have complacency. This was given to me by my cousin. I was pretty young, and I taped it to my mirror. I was probably like 10, and I love it. It's like a frog, and he's just like, fuck you. He's never going to give up. And I was just like, I love that. Like, it really, really spoke to me. And that plus the story about my dad was not a hockey player at all. He wasn't a sports dad. He was actually super chill looking back on it. He never really gave me any advice about sports or anything like that. But the one time he got pissed off at me was I was probably 12 years old, and by that time I was doing really good at hockey. And I still remember this game. We were winning 7-1, and I probably had like 5 of the goals. And we finished the game, and I'm all like, yeah, feeling good. And I hop in the car, and we're driving home, and my dad's pissed off, and he's like, what was that? And I'm like, what are you talking about? I'm like, that was amazing. And he's like, no. He's like, the entire third period, like, you're skating around like this, like, not even trying. And he's like, that's bullshit. He's like, you know how disrespectful that is to your opponents to quit and to give up? He's like, if I walk into that building, I don't want to be able to tell if you're up 7-1 or down 7-1. Like, you work to that last buzzer no matter what. And it's so disrespectful to do anything else. And that really, like, hit home with me. Like, to give anything less than your best, like whether it's in homework or you're building something or playing something, it's disrespectful to your opponents, but it's kind of to yourself as well. And so those lessons really helped me. I was a kid, like I said, grew up typical Canadian. I had the Oilers jersey. I grew up in Edmonton. Those lessons served me really well. I grew up a total fan. We had season tickets. I watched the Oilers win the Stanley Cup, progressed through the stages of hockey until I got pretty good, and I got drafted to junior hockey, which is ages 16 to 20. I got drafted to Portland, Oregon, to the Winterhawks. And so there was a decision, like, do I go to college or do I go to junior hockey? And my parents said, go for it. You got one shot. College will always be there. You can go when you're older. And so this is like this lottery ticket of like, okay, I'm going to go try to play hockey. So I moved to Portland when I was 16 to play for the Winterhawks and had a lot of success there. Made the all-star teams every year. We won a championship with that team, put up great statistics. But if you don't know hockey, like I'm 5'10", which is pretty average. It's good. But in hockey, that's pretty small, especially when I was coming through. This was like 1998, 99. And it's a tough game. There's a lot of big guys. So when it came time to be 18 years old, that's when you get drafted to the professional leagues. And what happens is the Central Scouting Agency, which is, I think, just a collection of scouts that scout all the junior ranks throughout the world. They have rankings of players, and right from 1 all the way down to like 250 or something like that. And I wasn't ranked for my year for my draft. So what that means is they're like, well, he's not quite in the top 250 players in his age group, so he's not ranked. Unfortunately, for unranked players, you don't get invited to the combine. So people familiar with the combine, NFL combine stuff, that's where basically all the kids that can get drafted come in and work out and show how much they can bench press, how fast they are, how high they can jump, how much fat they have on them. It's like a science experiment. But if you're not drafted, you don't get invited. So I was so pissed off. Like I said, I had a lot of success. There was guys that couldn't make my junior team that were ranked. I was like, what the fuck? So this is where the punk kind of came through. I was like, screw that. And so I wrote a letter, and I faxed it. That goes back to 1997. I faxed it to every general manager in the NHL. And I'll kind of read it, because I have to read it. So it says, recently the Central Scouting Bureau conducted physical testing for selected draft-eligible players. Since I was not invited for testing, I can only assume that the Central Scouting believes that their current rankings accurately reflect my position with other players eligible for the upcoming draft. Central Scouting has proven very inaccurate in the past, and this is no exception. I believe without a doubt that I will play in the National Hockey League. Please accept the enclosed testing results for your consideration. This test was conducted at the University of Alberta by the same people who tested for Central Scouting. So I booked an appointment, and I went and I did my own testing with the same people that did the testing. I'm like, fuck you, NHL. So it says, I'm looking forward to proving myself this fall at my first NHL training camp for whatever team is prepared to give me that opportunity. I guarantee that the team that has the confidence to draft me will not regret their decision. I will be in Portland until the end of the school season, how friendly, and can be reached through their office. Thank you for your time and consideration. And that was my awful signature, very practiced and slow at the bottom. And so I faxed it to every general manager in the NHL. I wish I could have seen their face when they opened it. I don't know, it just doesn't happen. But it's a good thing I tried, because I also, I had a Edmonton Oilers jersey when I was growing up, but I also had a Pittsburgh Penguin jersey. And I loved Mario Lemieux, was like my hero. So that's a Mario Lemieux jersey, one of the greatest hockey players that ever lived. And Pittsburgh's the one that took a chance. So I got drafted in the 8th round, which is the second last round. I think it was like 200 and something-ish in the draft. I got invited to training camp in Pittsburgh. And my very first time on the ice, I went out and I fought the guy that got drafted in the first round, and I beat the shit out of him. So you got to get your foot in the door somehow. It's hockey. You're allowed to do it. So I ended up making the Penguins. Not that year, but the next year. But I made a good impression, I guess. Went on to solidify myself as an NHL player. We went to the playoffs. We went to the semifinals with Pittsburgh. Scored my first playoff goal. Had so many memorable experiences. Played with Mario Lemieux, whose jersey I had when I was a kid, like crazy. So it could have and then obviously this is most recently playing for my hometown Oilers and being the captain of the jersey that I used to own when I was a kid. So that could very easily not have happened, though. I did everything I could, and I think I laid it out on the table, I pushed the chips in, to use that analogy. But to the next lesson, I mean, worry about what you can control. I mean, after that, you can't really control others. And like the GMs, I can't control what their decision would be, but I did everything I could to influence them and to, like I said, be all in. They could have not drafted me, and I could have a completely different life, and that's that. There's nothing more I could have done. But I planted the seed. So that's what I try to teach my kids, is only worry about the stuff you can control. They come home sometimes like this. They're like, oh, this girl at school was mean to me. She said I'm stupid. Or they're figure skaters now, so it gets pretty competitive. There's stuff like that. You come home, and there's so much outside influence now. We've heard that, about girls growing up in today's age. It is so tough. But I try to make that a foundational thing of don't worry about the noise. Just worry about how you're reacting to things, how you're treating people, how you're conducting yourself. I said you can't control how that girl's treating you. You can't control what they're going to say to you. Don't drive yourself crazy. Just worry about yourself. And all you can do is kind of set the example and set a good example, and hopefully others will follow. So when you try to influence people, though, you can't expect them to change overnight. You got to play the long game. And so my story with influencing people over the long game started in Calgary when I played for the Flames. This is Dr. David Suzuki. All the Canadians are like, dude. All the Americans are like, who's this guy? He's a super famous Canadian. I think he was voted the best Canadian ever. It was an actual thing. It was a legit competition. I swear to God. He's a famous scientist and environmentalist, and he had a show on the CBC, which is the Canadian Broadcasting Company, which is all we have on TV. We just got satellite a couple years ago. But David Suzuki is this amazing environmentalist. He had to show the nature of things, which explained everything about nature and taught me 10 times more than I learned in school about the world that we live in. And he was a serious hero of mine. And so I was doing all this environmental stuff, and I was recycling, and I bought the first Prius. And I was so excited because one day David Suzuki's foundation called, and they're like, hey, you want to have breakfast with David Suzuki? And I was like, yes! I was like, this is amazing. I'm going to have breakfast with David Suzuki. And I was so excited. I was telling my wife, and I was getting ready to all right, what are conversation breakers? So I played it pretty cool for the first bit, and we just kind of talked stuff. And then I broke into how great I was. I'm recycling all the time, David. And I compost. and I've had worms, and like they're great, the compost, and I use the dirt, and he kind of like, he was really polite actually. He kind of was like, oh, they're great. And then after I was kind of explaining how cool I was, he's like, so good for you, man. He's like, what are you doing publicly? And I was like, and I had no answer, nothing. And he's like, he kind of went back to what I talked about earlier. He's like, you're playing hockey in Canada. He's like, you have a microphone in your face every single day. People watch you on TV, multiple times a week. All these kids look up to you, they're buying your jersey. Like you have this unbelievable platform. He's like, you're doing nothing? He's like, shame on you, man. He's like, that sucks. And I was like, ugh. Oh, man. And so I'm happy that I didn't just like shrink and like, I'm like, all right, like, you got to help me. I'm like, let's think of something. And so that day we actually came up with this idea. He's like, all right, like, what do we do in hockey? Like, what can we do publicly? And we travel a lot. We have all these road games, right? So we're flying planes, staying in hotels, taking buses. It's a lot of CO2. There's a lot of emissions. But you kind of have to do it to have a sports league, right? Like there's away games. He's like, you know what? Work with my foundation, and we'll pick gold star offsets so that we'll add up all your CO2 over the year, and then we'll actually fund clean energy projects that will create the same amount of CO2. So you're supplementing in like a third world country, like these clean power generators. I was like, oh, sweet, you're way smarter than me. So that's what we did. We calculated all the emissions, and it's what's now known as going carbon neutral is what we did. And so I was like, I'm going carbon neutral. Sweet. And so I talked to a couple teammates of mine about it, and I was like, we're doing this carbon neutral thing. I was like, this has got to be the platform for the whole NHL. You know how the NFL has the United Way? I'm like, we need to be the environment stuff. And the other guys are like, dude, no way. Like, it wasn't, climate change wasn't front page news, and all this sustainability wasn't like a catchphrase in 2000. Like, it should be, but it was kind of a weak response from it. But I kind of badgered them, and eventually 7 other teammates said, okay, fine, we'll do it. We'll do it with you. And so what we did was went carbon neutral for the entire season. We bought offsets. We paid money for these clean power generators, and we were the first pro athletes to go carbon neutral for a whole year. And so that following year, our union called. We're all unionized, and the union's like, this is a pretty cool idea. He's like, what's the catch? He's like, are you guys like trying to get endorsements or something like that? I'm like, no, we're just doing it because it's the right thing to do. And they're like, all right, we're in. He's like, the union's like, we'll buy for everybody. And I'm like, that kind of defeats the purpose, man. Like, I mean, if people don't voluntarily do it, like, what's the point? So we actually put out this huge campaign to all of my fellow players. There's 700 players in the NHL. And we put out this challenge to them, like, hey, here's something we did last year. We went carbon neutral. Here's how it works. Here's what it supports. Here's the clean energy it generates. Here's how much emissions we put out. Do you want to join us? And the following year, 500 guys signed up. So we had 500 guys go carbon neutral for an entire year. So I was like, wow, this is amazing. That parlayed into the NHL, which the union and the league are two very separate entities. That parlayed into the NHL saying, you know what, that's pretty cool. You guys are doing this environmental stuff. Like, let's do a green week or something like that, and we'll get green partners. And now the NHL has this whole program, NHL Green, which is a total leader amongst all sports leagues. And I mean, it's unbelievable. They have an entire team dedicated to only NHL Green, sustainability. They're a leader in a thing called the Green Sports Alliance, which is a hub for best practices for venues and leagues and teams to how to most efficiently run your buildings. And so you start thinking, you start adding up. The Green Sports Alliance has 500 members now between venues, teams, leagues. And you start thinking about it like, okay, like we get 20,000 people to our things. NASCAR, they get like 100,000. NASCAR is all like members as well. And all these venues are now incorporating green and sports and doing this. And so the impact has just been huge. And so we went from kind of like super like one carbon neutral thing. The NHL now is carbon neutral for their entire operations. They don't really brag about it that much. I always tell them they should. They're the 17th largest purchaser of clean energy in the entire United States. So that includes like Walmart and like, Apple and Google and all that. The NHL, like a sports league, is the 17th biggest purchaser of clean energy. So influence, you have to start somewhere, but it can build and it can spread and it can turn into some pretty incredible impacts. And so, actually, I just got an email too. Now I sit on the board for the Green Sports Alliance now as a member, and I've given a lot of talks. And I just got an email, and I'm going to the White House next week. Yeah, and so now we get to talk about sports and the environment and the impacts and how we can make that even better with White House people. Next lesson. Talk is cheap. I wrote on a little pen out there, probably didn't see it, but one of my favorite sayings is, you are what you do, not what you say, which is why I love this. Duke sent me this, and I was like, man, that's incredible. I mean, what a perfect name for an event, because I've been to a lot of conferences and stuff that could probably be named Talk. And they suck, because there's a lot of, and then nothing happens. This is not a room full of those kind of people. I think when you do something, it's about committing. So yeah, you have to talk about it, and you have to set goals and share those goals with people, but you have to commit to doing something to actually have an impact. I'm so scared to be a hypocrite. That's like whatever your carrot on a stick is, that's mine. I don't want to be a hypocrite in anything. So I try to do everything to its greatest potential. When I do something, though, I think I have so much going on in my life that I think the only way to do it right is to focus on one thing and be all in on that one thing. And multitasking is shit. It's horrible. And it's so easy to do nowadays. You have to commit to the moment you're in. So, when I'm with my kids, be with your fucking kids. Be a parent. Be in that moment, and it's gone in an instant. When I'm in classes, kids, leave me the fuck alone. I'm in class, and I'm in that moment. When I'm at the rink, it's all hockey. But when I leave the rink, hockey's gone. I don't talk about hockey with my wife or the games or that stuff. So very segmented, focused areas of my life, I think, have brought me so much success because you fully commit to them. And the people that you're doing it with can feel that. They can feel that commitment. They can feel that energy that you give to giving your best and just being all in. And the people that are really good at this are grandparents. If you ever watch grandparents with kids, they're not on their phone. They're not kind of distracted. They're like, man, it's our time with the kids. We are doing everything. And they're all in. They get it. They've been there. They understand the importance of how precious that time is and with the kids, but no matter anything that you're doing. And my most important lesson I'm saving for last. So be an onion. So this comes from my wife, actually. She's like, I'm horrible at, like I said, I segment stuff in my life, and it's a flaw too because I don't share a lot. So she usually finds stuff out secondhand and gets so mad. She's like, you didn't tell me you're doing this. I'm like, oh yeah, I should have told you. And it's all right. I mean, she shouldn't find out secondhand, but she coined the term. She's like, you're a fucking onion. And she's like, I pull back these layers, and there's layers, and another layer, and another layer, another layer. And there's just too much to go on. So, but I think being an onion is a great thing. Here's my onion, my dude who I think is the best. This is Greg Graffin. Anybody know who Greg Graffin is? No, okay, perfect. Not perfect, that's actually horrible. He's the lead singer of Bad Religion, the greatest punk band ever. They were founded in 1979. They're still killing it. This is actually Ava, my daughter, with Greg last year. Here's the thing about Ava and Greg picture. So right before this picture, they were talking about science and evolution and biology. And why the hell would he be? It's a punk rocker, right? Well, he's also a PhD through Cornell, and he lectures on life sciences, paleontology, evolution, and he's this crazy punk rocker, philosopher, PhD. What a cool prof. So he's the dude that I put up here as an onion. He's got layers. He's got more to him than just being a punk. So while I might be most well known as a hockey player, the nicest compliment I ever got, there's an article written, and I was kind of doing this with a reporter once, and I read the article, and he was like, I think the headline was something like Renaissance Man, Ference, and I was like, I literally had to look up what Renaissance meant. I was like, what is that? I thought it was like a medieval knight thing. I don't know. But it's the greatest compliment. It means you got lots going on. You got lots of shit, and you can do it all. And so, I think it's great when it's hard for other people to explain, what you're doing. So activism, whether it's, stuff with Pride, whether it's going to sniper school and hanging out with, I got a really good friend who's a ranger, and so we went down to Georgia for a while and did sniper school and Army Ranger school. Whether it's you're just the buddy that screws around. Apparently they don't celebrate Halloween in Brazil. I was Batman, and people were looking at me like I was crazy. It was Halloween. You got to dress up. If people have to describe you as the environmentalist, that's all right. That's cool. Or venture capital, like business, helping to change the world. Whatever it is, I believe that everything should be in moderation, whether it's your diet, your life. I think that the most interesting people and the most interesting things in life have a ton of recipes. So, I asked the chef this morning, I'm like, how many things went into that curry last night? Because the curry was unbelievable. And he's like, 17. I'm like, yes, that totally backs up my point. I'm like, everything good in life has a lot of shit going on in it. There's a lot of spices and a lot of things and a lot of layers and a lot of ingredients. And so for my kids, that's what I want. I'm like, be an onion. Have lots of stuff going on. Be lots of things. Be really hard to describe what you are. Don't just be a jock. Don't just be a nerd. Don't just be a coder. Don't be, a dancer, skater. Be all of those things. Don't pigeonhole yourself into a tiny little space. And I think that's probably the most important thing that has helped me. And I think that's the foundation that if my kids can take that through life, I'll be such a proud dad. So thank you.